Okay, welcome to Indonesia Pavilion. Selamat datang. Welcome to our international audience and speakers. I hope you enjoy your time here. Okay, let's talk about this scaling landscape restoration through carbon finance and partnerships. So, at the moment, the Ministry of Forestry Republic of Indonesia is working on a scheme to open this restoration business concession in degraded conservation area, which granting businesses the rights to manage them for 30 years or even more. So we will explore the strategic partnerships, the innovative financing mechanisms, including carbon market, blended finance, and also the partnerships across the value chain. But before we deep dive into the discussion, let's hear a keynote speech which will be presented by the Deputy for Coordination of Food Affordability and Security from the Ministry of Food Affairs Indonesia, Ibu Nani Hendiarti, through the pre-recorded video.
Excellencies, Ibu Laksmi Wijayanti, Director General of Sustainable Forest Management, Ministry of Forestry of the Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Edo Mahendra, Principal Advisor to the Indonesian Minister of Forestry, distinguished delegate speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Very good afternoon. First, I would like to apologize for not being in person in this important session, and my appreciation to the organizer, particularly to Asia, Pulp and Paper, Sinarmas and partner, for the strong commitment to advancing nature-based and inclusive climate action. As one of the world's most mega diverse countries, Indonesia is home to the tropical forests, mangrove, peatlands, and coral reef that serve as a lungs and the blue heart of the earth. Indonesia has the third largest tropical rainforest, with the mangrove forest around 3.4 million hectares. Those natural ecosystems are not only the foundation of the national prosperity, but also essential to the global climate stability, which could serve as carbon sink and home to unparalleled biodiversity. The government of Indonesia has made several forest-related policy changes to improve sustainable forest management, protect the environment, and overcome various challenges, such as the Government Regulation Number 27/2025 regarding protection and management of the mangrove ecosystem that enforce strict rules to preserve and restore mangroves both inside and outside forest area. Also, the Presidential Decree on Number 110/2025 regarding value of carbon economy as the key instrument for the climate change mitigation and adaptation. It specifically regulates the opening of the international carbon trading and the direct recognition of the carbon unit certified by the internationally with the high integrity and standards and methodologies. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, in the field of nature, following our good collaboration on the mangrove development for climate, Indonesia and the UAE have agreed to initiate and promote the Mangrove Alliance for Climate, or MAC, since its formation at COP28 in Dubai in 2022, as a strategic platform to make joint and inclusive effort in the global climate action related with the mangrove conservation and restoration. Our partnership will be expanding into new initiative, which is the Indonesia and UAE Nature and Climate Partnership that agreed upon through the LOI and further strengthened during bilateral meetings in New York on the margins of the 80th United Nations General Assembly. Also will be discussed in more detail during the workshop in Jakarta next week. This partnership will focus on the forest management and restoration, ecosystem and biodiversity conservation, and the promotion of the nature-based solution for climate actions, and will be announced in January 2026. The future project is prepared comprehensively based on what Indonesia needs and transparently with public accountability and inclusive participation. We will implement pilot project under the Public-Private Community Partnership or PPCP model, which will increase investment to support land and forest restoration and conservation, including mangrove and peatland. This will ensure that local communities get beneficiaries. My last, in the good momentum, I invite all partners, national and international, to turn our commitment into action. If we protect our nature, then we also protect our future. Thank you and wish for fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Well, what a privilege. This forum is attended by as many as 5 prominent speakers and 2 keynote speakers. So I would like to invite the second keynote speaker. She is the Director General Sustainable Forest Management from the Ministry of Forestry, Republic of Indonesia, the superwoman Ibu Laksmi Wijayanti.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to address you today at this important forum on scaling landscape restoration through carbon finance and partnerships. Gathered here in Belem, surrounded by one of the world's most vital ecosystems, we are reminded that the solutions to the global climate challenge must begin with how we value and manage our natural resources. For Indonesia, this is not an abstract commitment. It is a national priority. Forests and peatlands form the backbone of our climate strategy and the foundation of our people's livelihoods. They are central to our vision of achieving a forestry and other land use or FOLU net sink by 2030, as set out in our enhanced nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement. We have also recently launched our second NDC target as part of this ongoing commitment. Indonesia's progress over the past decade has demonstrated that growth and conservation can go hand in hand. Through strong governance, better enforcement, and active community participation, our deforestation rate has declined since 2016. Building on this progress, we are now focused on scaling restoration and sustainable management. Our ecosystem restoration concessions will soon enable the private sector to manage degraded conservation areas under long-term licenses, ensuring both accountability and ecological performance. Through the Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan 2025-2045, we are exploring biodiversity credits as a way to channel investment into conservation outcomes. And through our social forestry program, more than 8 million hectares have been allocated to local communities, turning them into direct partners in managing and protecting our forests. These policy instruments form the enabling environments for landscape restoration at scale. But policy alone is not enough. We need collaboration, innovation, and trust. Carbon finance and blended funding models offer a new way forward, connecting global capital with local action. If implemented with integrity, this mechanism can help restore millions of hectares, support sustainable livelihoods, and strengthen the credibility of nature-based climate solutions. We are encouraged by the partnerships already emerging across Indonesia between government agencies, companies, civil societies, and communities to advance shared restoration goals. Events like today's session are vital to deepening these relationships and ensuring that financing mechanisms truly reflect the realities on the ground. As we continue our journey, Indonesia remains committed to openness and collaboration. We welcome engagement from all partners, investors, researchers, private sectors, and development organizations to help us regenerate our landscapes and secure the well-being of both people and planet. Restoring nature is not just a technical challenge, it is an act of shared responsibility and of faith that working together we can build a future that is both sustainable and just. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Yanti, for mentioning that economic growth and conservation can go hand in hand. And I think that's the whole reason why we're all here, right? Okay, let's get started with the discussion by inviting our moderator. He's the Executive Director of the Tropical Forest Alliance from World Economic Forum, Jack Hurd.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. We're here to talk about scaling landscape restoration. I hope you're all in the right place. And I'd like to thank the Indonesian government and the pavilion for adjusting the temperature. It's a little bit like Surabaya in here, and we all feel good about that. A nice warm tropical time in the wet season. So, as mentioned, my name is Jack Hurd. I head the Tropical Forest Alliance, and I also lead something called the Earth Systems Agenda at the World Economic Forum. And what this means is that our work on forestry and our work in the ocean. And so that encompasses both the topics we're going to be speaking about today. What we're going to do is I'm going to be joined by this wonderful panel of experts. We're going to have a few questions, a few answers. We may have a slide or two to present. And then we'll open it up for questions from the floor if you guys can all hear me. And if I've managed the time appropriately, which is a big question. So actually what I'd like to do is maybe I'd like to ask all the panelists to come sit down here, and then I'll introduce you one by one. I think that might be nice. So Marissa and Emily and Jasmine and Ria and Edu, please, you can sit where I'll probably sit here, I guess. This makes sense. Okay, so let's see, we're gonna introduce them one by one. So Pak Edu Maharinda is a principal advisor for the Ministry of Forestry. Thank you very much, Pak, for being here. Jasmine Prihartini is the head of landscape conservation and environment at APP. Thank you, Ibu Jasmine, for coming. Emily Landis is the Global Climate and Ocean Director is what I have, but it says up here, you're in charge of global climate adaptation and resilience. So we'll give you that title for the day, Emily. Thank you very much for coming. Marissa is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Standard Charter, and Ria Marsudi is the CEO of Fair Atmos, which is an organization based in Jakarta as well. So we've got a lot of different people. We've got a lot of different perspectives. We're going to have a few questions and discussion, and then we're going to see where we go. But what I'm going to do first, Pak Edu, I'm going to start with you because I know you've got a couple of slides you want to share that sort of sets the stage for where the government is on this issue. And I think we've asked Pak to come here today because the real question is, over the last year, we've witnessed some maybe rolling back of commitments on the global level around climate issues and nature issues. And you're obviously in an important position as the principal advisor to the Ministry of Forestry. So the question is, I guess, is how do you define the role of the ministry in setting the context and supporting restoration on a larger scale? And really, what is the role of policy? So we'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes, if that's okay, to sort of work us through your slides, and we'll go from there. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Very good afternoon. Is it?
It's just afternoon, I think.
Very good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, Budurjan and all the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I know my title there says Principal Advisor to the Minister, but I'm also happen to also be the Senior Advisor to the Indonesia Climate and Growth Dialogue. that is under Ibu Mari Pangestu as well. So I'm advising her as well. So please allow me to use another hat just for 2 minutes so that I can introduce some of the principles that I think also in line with what the government of Indonesia is working on to make sure that we have an effective carbon governance. So the ICGD, the Indonesia Commission Climate and Growth Dialogue, has issued a paper, a white paper, that is called Building a High Integrity Carbon Market Ecosystem for Indonesia's Green Growth. This is a product of a collaboration with multi-sector partners so that we can contribute in the thought leadership in building a high integrity carbon market that should strengthen Indonesia's not only environment aspirations, economic aspirations, economic targets, but also competitiveness, social aspects, and that we can attract international finance and support national climate goals. Next. Great, I did my part, so I did that, I introduced, yeah. So, but basically, the beautiful thing about this is that actually the principles that are aligned in this report is also the principles that I also invest personally and are also shared by my boss, that is the Minister of Forestry. So what are our national priorities on how we should do, how we should build the carbon ecosystem for Indonesia that already has the new foundations, that is the Presidential Regulation number 110/2025. So number one, several, this is not in order of priorities. This is basically the aspects that we need to make sure that we can incorporate in our strategy in developing carbon market ecosystem in Indonesia. Number one, we need to make sure that we can channel domestic and international finance to high impact mitigation. I think that goes to without saying. Reduce cost of beating indices, enhance market liquidity, price signals, mitigate potential trade loss. This also relates to actually the potential of proliferation of CBAM. Yeah, so it's not only, it's not really under Ministry of Forestry, but still we need to make sure that Indonesia's competitiveness is even more developed, that can piggyback on the development of the new carbon market ecosystem. And also we cannot forget the socio-economic outcomes and development priorities coming from the new presidential regulation. So ladies and gentlemen, I think I would like to move to the next slide. I think this is more important. Back. Yes, okay. So out of these three components, I would say pillars: unlocking finance, balance the needs, the domestic targets, and how we can also contribute to the global public goods, and also to make sure we do some private investment capital recycling from these carbon principles. So there are 10. I'm going to try my best to just read them out and then give a little bit of color if it is necessary. Number one, we need to leverage Indonesia's high integrity mitigation potential to mobilize climate finance. This is the reason why a few months back in September, Ministry of Forestry signed an MOU with IETA, International Emission Trading Association. That is the demand side. We want quality demand. That is also the reason why on the 8th of November, Ministry of Forestry signed an MOU with the Integrity Council of the Voluntary Carbon Market, ICVCM. That is to make sure that we know where to go. That is for the high quality, high integrity supply of carbon going forward. So we have the demand, we have the supply, and few days, I think yesterday, Ministry of Forestry was also present in the event to welcome the principles set by the coalition to grow the carbon markets by the UK, Singapore, Kenya, and few other countries. We welcome these principles, and we know that the secretariat of that is actually managed by VCMI, that also manage the standard for the high quality demand. So that's number one. Number two, I think goes without saying, we want to make sure that number three, identify appropriate coverage of mitigation under voluntary and compliance schemes. That is now explicitly allowed under the new Presidential Regulation 110. The next block, the next building blocks, is to make sure that we can optimize the Article 6 as well. Ladies and gentlemen, in the previous regulatory regime, 98/2021, the VCM is not explicitly stated, and carbon markets is seen as a residual for the carbon ecosystem. That paradigm has been flipped. It is now a dawn of a new era whereby carbon pricing, carbon market is an instrument, it's instrumental. Before it was residual, now it is instrumental. Instrumental for what? Instrumental for the achievement of our aspiration. Hence our NDC, and for the Minister of Forestry, that is the the follow net sink 2030. What is the end game for that? That is to support economic development. That is to make sure that with this carbon financing, we can unlock transitional capital, climate financing as much as possible from different channels, so then we can create new sources of growth, new sources to support upward social mobility, and to make sure that our aspiration, environment aspiration is reached. So that's why we also prioritize quick wins. We are not close to Article 6, for instance. Now we can open, but we want to make sure that we do it right. So we have to make sure that, when we sell the CA, because there is an export of carbon credits, then we make sure that we can reinvest that capital into low-cost mitigation activities for our NTC, so that virtuous cycle can be achieved with this new strategy. I think that's all to answer your first question related to the new Presidential Regulation number 110/2025. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Pak. I mean, this is great that you've been able to show these slides, because it really does a great job of outlining what is critically important for this work to take off in Indonesia. And I think, as you said, it's instrumental, not residual, in going to achieve the AFOLU Net Sink 2030 goal. So thanks very much for going through that, Pak. So now I'm going to move down to Marissa. And Marissa, you work with an institutional investor. And so we're interested from your perspective, what are the key barriers that you face as an institutional investor in allocating capital to restoration-related carbon projects, and how can we really improve the bankability of those things going forward, especially, in light of some of the ideas that Pak has put up here on the stage?
Sure.
Thanks.
So first of all, I have to commend the government of Indonesia, because this is a very considered approach. You can see how detailed this is, and that is, in our opinion, to make markets confident and to galvanize capital at scale, you really do need to see a holistic plan. And that is part of the development of any new market, is commonality of standards, very clear and transparent communication, sort of rules, systems, and so on. So that is all the path to doing exactly what you're asking me, which is how do we make it bankable and how do we effectively reduce risk? What do we see? So just a little bit of background. At Standard Chartered, our marketplace is the developing economies. Indonesia is such a core market of ours. We've been in Indonesia more than 100 years. And equally, I was delighted to hear about the MOU between the Middle East, because the Middle East is also a core market of ours. So there's a pattern here when we get like-minded countries together, because the power and scale also creates market liquidity. But the way we think about the carbon markets is as both a facilitator to try to help mature the ecosystem. 2 is to help participate in standard setting, for the very reason that if we have harmony of standards, then we can have global adoption. 3 is we are very, very keen on providing liquidity in the markets so that countries can monetize their carbon credits when they generate them. 4 is transparency, so that it's very clear what we mean when we say high integrity. And all of these things then come together to break down the barriers that we sometimes face. So as an institution, I think we are the only bank that sits on the council of the ICVCM, the Integrity Council, that is help defining what those standards are for high integrity, and we're constantly making sure and trying to seek harmonization. So I'm also thrilled that on both the supply and demand side, the government in Indonesia is drafting under what I call the big umbrella of harmonization. But what do we often see as the building blocks or the stumbling blocks? We're a financing bank, so we both provide the capital, but often we act as the agent too. So if someone wants to monetize a credit, we will sell it for them. What we hear from the buyers, if we're talking about nature, is permanence. Right? If you're going to generate a carbon credit through reforestation, afforestation, regenerating nature, we need to make sure that that activity is going to stay for a very long time. Where things go wrong is when we're talking about time frames are 2, 3, 5 years. When you're restoring ecosystems, that is not a 6-month, 2-year program. That's a long-term thing. So again, Indonesia, talking about 30-year timetables, you're attacking some of the problems that we would otherwise face when people think in very short-term increments. Second thing is, when we are interacting with buyers, they want to have confidence that the credits are going to deliver what they say they are, right? You're buying something that's got to deliver ecosystem benefits. So the ability to be considered in terms of the additionality, right, and the measurement and the performance is something that's very critical to give confidence to the markets. So it's also why we've got to work really closely in partnership with those who are sitting on this stage. There is no way a bank can do this on our own. What are we good at? We can raise money, we can trade, we can bring buyers to the market, etc. But we are not policymakers. We need policy to participate. We're also not conservationists. And my friend from the Nature Conservancy, we love the Nature Conservancy, because what does the Nature Conservancy do? They are practitioners on the ground that can make sure that when you're restoring an ecosystem, it really will do what it says it's going to do about delivering those conservation benefits. And then we need corporates on the buy side, and we need all the other actors. So I think that is the one other unlock that I see over and over again is a ticket to making all this work.
Okay, super. Thank you very much, Marissa. And I think, one of the points you made at the outset, this notion that this new policy can help reduce risks for people who are investing in this space. And obviously that's one of the reasons why the government's got this sorted out. I also just want to call attention to the 4 points you mentioned about, maturing the ecosystem, dealing with standardization, facilitating liquidity, and providing transparency. These are obviously important elements in order for this market to really flourish. Okay, so we're gonna move over here now and ask Ibu Jasmine from APP. So, Ibu, you're a practitioner. APP is a very large land manager in Indonesia. What are APP's strategies for ensuring that you can deliver verifiable, credible impact, picking up on the word that Marissa used, verifiable, credible impact through your restoration projects? And I know you've just come out with a brand new sustainability strategy with some big targets in there on restoration. So over to you, please.
Thank you, Jack, for the question. For those who are not familiar with APP Group, we are a major integrated pulp, paper, and tissue industry with plantation and mills in Indonesia and China. APP employs more than 65,000 people globally, and our products are sold to more than 150 countries. So yeah, Jack, our sustainability journey started or began in 2012, where we launched the Sustainability Roadmap Vision 2020, followed by the Forest Conservation Policy in 2013, and then the Sustainability Roadmap Vision 2020 has been evolved into Sustainability Roadmap Vision 2030. And currently we are updating our commitment into the Regenesis 2050 that consists of 3 pillars. The first pillar is forest, where we talk about conserve and restore about 1 million landscape to achieve the to promote the ecosystem health. And then the second one is about the people, where we empower community and also uphold the human rights through the inclusive development. And then the third one is about the value chain, where we are creating shared value for the nature and also the climate through the responsible supplier management. So at APP Group, when we are talking about credibility and variability, impact are the core of our principle or our commitment, where through the Genesis we develop the science-based planning, data-driven monitoring, and also the verification. And then we start this process by doing the comprehensive baseline assessment, where we also doing the hydrology mapping and then pit inventory, also look at for what is the previous ecosystem in the area before, and then after that we creating our long-term restoration planning. Then for doing the restoration, because our restoration program or project is very site specific. That's why we need the basic data for us in order to do the right restoration in the area. And then to track the progress of the restoration, we combine the technology. We use the satellite imagery and also the LiDAR for us to monitor the revegetation and also for the prevention for the fire. And then importantly is the verification. We are collaborate with third party and also the university and NGO, so we can ensure that our data that we are doing is aligned with the global standard. And then by integrating the science, technology and transparency, it is allow us to deliver data that is right. So yeah, thank you.
Super, thank you very much. And for anybody who has seen the Regenesis 2030 strategy, it's a pretty comprehensive set of documents. There's a lot of really good thinking in there. And I think, as you've mentioned, the evolution from 2012 to where you are now shows 13 years of solid learning on top of some experiences from before that period of time as well. So it's great to see APP moving in this direction, and clearly some of the work that Pak has mentioned earlier around the carbon credit market is going to be important there. We're going to move to Ria. So Ria, how does Fair Atmos approach integrity in the carbon markets? And this is clearly something that's come up, the notion of integrity. How do you focus on the integrity in the carbon markets to ensure that credits generally reflect measurable restoration outcomes? And I'll just remember that Marissa had talked about the issue of permanence, and she had talked about the issue of additionality as well. So thank you.
Right, thanks so much, Jack. First of all, thank you, Ibu Elim and the APP team to have me in this panel. It's a great panel, and I've been learning a lot from the previous speakers. A little bit of introduction for Atmos. We are a landscape restoration and blue carbon project developer, and we're very honored to already been working with APP as well in developing large-scale landscape restoration. And we're also active in advocating for carbon policy across ASEAN. So I think your question, how do we ensure integrity, right? We're very glad that we are convening here today in 2025, where there has been a lot of learning and a lot of collective science that has already helped us to define what is high integrity project today. So number one, we do choose the selection of methodology that is passing most of the case, CCP, or Carbon Core Principle by the ICVCM. We have been, a great collaborator together with Amy in really trusting that the methodology that has passed the ICVCM and CCP has already passed through the additionality questions. Permanence / if I may say it, in the world of restoration, is about durability, the longest durability. That's number two. And also the question also about co-benefits, right? So a lot of the work that we do right now we've been working with more than 400 concessions across Southeast Asia, is try to help them adapt and try to help them embrace restoration methodologies. That today, a lot would require dynamic baselining. So like what Bu Jasmine already mentioned, baseline is everything to ensure integrity. And now the honest for project developers is to apply this scientific methodology to choose the right baseline for you to compare to, so then a ton of additional credit is a ton of additional credit. It is a lot of work. We can't cover this in like one panel, but when you want to really choose the right comparison to what your intervention is, it's a lot of work, a lot of science, and a lot of technology needs to be applied. But that's just the first thing. The second thing is actually doing it on the ground. We need to upskill a lot of our technical forestry people to really understand how do you measure the right above ground biomass. Maybe it's good to do a sample of like 10% of our 30 by 30 meters, but when you're talking about large scale restoration, you're talking about 200,000 hectares of area that you want to replant. How do you use LiDAR technology? How do you use all of these new approaches that allow you to still not compromise the level of integrity when it's like 20,000 times the size of your sample plots, right? So that's a lot of, training, upskilling, again, collaborating, because there are a lot of great projects out there who has already implemented different things. And it is already time for Indonesia to also meet that level of standards. And last but not least, and I will touch on your next question actually on the monitoring part, right? So none of these would matter if we cannot communicate it well. So those three, I think, is the bare minimum that we need to apply. It is a lot of work, Jack. So I'm keen to also hear how the panel find ways to go through this as a challenge for us all. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Thanks very much, Ria. I mean, I feel like, if we started with the setting of the policy and now we're talking about monitoring, so we're moving sort of up the pathway or down the pathway. I also just want to call attention to that distinction or evolution in terminology between permanence and durability. It's not a between thing, but I think we all know permanence is the language we have. What permanence means in any sector, let alone the land use sector, is something that is worth considering. But we know that everybody has to be investing time and energy in the types of things that are going to be important to be as permanent or as durable as possible. So thanks very much for that. Emily, we're going to end with you on this round of questions. So you're with the Nature Conservancy. I think what would be really interesting to get a sense of is how can policymakers and regional governments, and obviously they're really important in a country like Indonesia, regional governments or provincial governments and below, how can they better coordinate with international standards such as the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets and Article 6 mechanisms? How do we make that sync together?
If I had the actual answer, I think we could all leave, but I will try my best. First, the Nature Conservancy, we are over 80 different countries worldwide. We also have a partner organization called YCAN in Indonesia. So we've been doing carbon market work for many, many, many years. With that has come many, many challenges, and policy being one of the biggest holdups. So I'll give two examples. The first one is actually in the United States. We are currently doing the biggest eelgrass restoration project in the world in the Virginia Coast Reserve. It's an amazing project, but the biggest holdup we had, which took 5 years, was policy. So we had this great project. We knew it could generate carbon credits. It could help pay for the monitoring and conservation of the seagrass, which the government had to pay for. And we were saying, hey, if we sell these carbon credits, we can pay for the restoration. We can pay for the monitoring. Like, this is saving you money. Thought it was an easy sell. It was not. So we then had to spend a long amount of time working with the national and then also the Virginia government to pass a law. So we had to pass a law to allow the restoration conservation of the work to generate carbon credits because it had never been done before in the state. And so I would say that had we have known that policy component would have taken 5 years, we probably would have started there first. But it does just signal that a lot of these governments are excited, but they just don't know how to do it. And so I think the issue even was with the verified carbon standard, with the VERA methodology, it didn't even take into account a state government. So we had to rewrite the actual methodology so the state could sell the credit. So it's, some of these things are at the most basic level that you think that they're understanding, and it's not there. And so that really just takes time to build up. The second is, I think a lot of countries hear about Article 6, they see the money, they think, oh my goodness, carbon markets are going to save us, it's going to pay for everything. And it actually isn't. There's very few places, especially in coastal ecosystems, where it's going to generate enough revenue to justify the project. And so one of the places we work in is in Papua New Guinea. And so we've been working there for many, many years, doing an amazing project with women called Women Market Mary, which is women in the mangroves selling mud crabs to help their economic livelihoods. But the big thing was they were like, let's do a carbon market project. Let's do a carbon market project. The government came in and said, we're super interested in this carbon market project. They said Article 6. They sorted out Article 6 for exactly how this project would work in the mangroves. And then we brought in the scientists. And there was no loss of mangroves. There was no threat of loss of mangroves. And there was no way we could justify, as the Nature Conservancy, as a science-based organization, that this is a carbon market project. And so we had to go back to the drawing board with the government and say, we still want to recognize you have protected these pristine mangroves. Thank you. And so we just launched actually this week the blue carbon policy that the national government has just endorsed and is now part of their NDC that has just been submitted. And so that is going to now signal to multilateral banks and different investors that way, hey, provide economic assistance to these communities who are actually doing the right thing by mangroves. So sometimes it's also about finding policy to shift as well.
I'm going to come to you in just a sec, Marissa. So were you finished, Emily, or no?
I can be. No, it's okay.
Are you finished or no? I'm going to come to you in just a sec, Marissa, but I just want to, you can hang on to that. Yeah. I just want to comment on one thing here. I think this is really interesting because I guess in both those examples, the first one you realize that actually we have to rewrite legislation in order to account for what we're trying to do. The second one seemed like a really good thing to do, but the carbon market was the wrong instrument to do it. And I think that's one thing for us all to think about because we expect the carbon markets to solve a whole bunch of problems out there when it comes to nature-based solutions, but they're there to solve a very specific problem, not all problems. So, Marissa, I'm going to come to you, and then we're going to sort of work our way back up the line here. And you're able, I'm going to ask you a question, but you can follow up on what Emily said if you'd like to. So what I'm interested in as we shift from just talking about the policy to now looking at scaling impact through public-private partnerships. These PPPs, if you will, they can play an important role in balancing short-term development priorities with long-term restoration ambitions. And what do you think is holding us back from having more of the types of partnerships that are necessary to get off the ground?
So if you don't mind, I did want to address your prior question.
Go for it.
And you absolutely had teed it up for me because the carbon markets are not always the solution in every case. And we're working on a wonderful project in Indonesia, and this answers your second question, which is we have two conservation organizations, one international, one local. We have an organization which is effectively, for my words, an employee trade organization. So the benefits are going back to the people. It is a nature-based solution in the seaweed field, and it's the Indonesian government, where we're working together to take what is currently a commodity crop, which is subject to wild swings in commodity prices. So these workers, and there are many of them in the seaweed field in Indonesia that are working, aren't getting much more than very marginal money for the work that they're doing because the product is a commodity. So it wouldn't be necessarily the dream carbon project, but talk about a nature ecosystem benefit. What we're working on is how do we upskill the product through processing. When you process seaweed, all of a sudden the value goes up somewhere between 3, 5, and sometimes 10 times. And now imagine if we get that money back into the local communities to help create livelihoods and jobs and continue to foster working in the seaweed field, which is a nature positive activity, and it protects against other things that could happen from a developmental point of view, which then creates degradation. So talk about a virtuous circle. So I just wanted to touch on that for a second because it gets to your point about then blending different skill sets and why or how can we do more of this. Sometimes it's getting the right actors in the room. And one of the areas where I observe often is in these complex financing projects, who's missing in the room? The ultimate beneficiaries. And I think we need to do more of that because it's the people who are going to ultimately receive the benefit of a lot of this. And they can be the best stewards of the land, which creates the incremental benefits that we can all measure. And then the system starts to work in a very comprehensive and productive way. So 2 things I would say on that is make sure that we are thinking much more holistically about who belongs in the room in blended finance. And then secondly, make sure that we're really dissecting what each of these parties bring to the table, whether it's a specific policy intervention, whether it's a different form of a cost of capital which can buy down the overall project cost to make it affordable and viable, or if it's some other benefit that is missing in that project.
Yeah, that's super, Marissa. Thank you for that, because I think often we throw around this term public-private partnership like it's going to solve everything. And in the end, so many of these issues are going to require, yes, public policy to set the framework, yes, corporate engagement to sort of drive value into the system, but yes, also innovative finance, and yes, also civil society and community engagement. And there's probably a few other things in there, like good, solid biophysical and socioeconomic data, decision support tools, and things like that. So, thanks for pointing that out, Marissa. Okay, Edu, we're going to go back to you. So, you have two roles as an advisor, senior advisor, and I'm going to ask about the forestry ministry, if I may. So, Edo, Indonesia's forest ministry is currently working on a scheme to open restoration business concessions in degraded conservation areas, or it's reopening a scheme, granting businesses rights to manage them for 30 years, which is our sort of definition of not quite permanence, but something close, right? So this could fundamentally change some things in terms of attracting in investment for nature-based solutions. Can you share a little bit on what brought that policy about after many, many decades of land management experience in the Indonesian Ministry of Forestry has many decades of land management experience. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, there have been changes, right? There have been changes, and we are now open basically 3 boxes of opportunities for climate financing, which includes carbon financing, and one of those is actually for conservation. And this relates very explicitly and directly with the directive from the president himself. In his speech in the UNGA in September, the president clearly said that we have a target of replanting 12 million hectares for that. So this means a huge opportunity for ARR activities. Now the question comes, can the government do it ourselves? The answer is very clear. We cannot. This is a very tough burden, ambitious. It shows a clear ambition, high aspiration, but we need a strategy on how to make it happen. Now, with this new presidential regulation, we can make it happen because we open all channels. Now, what should we do to make sure that the efforts will be for nothing, that the efforts will be effective? The first thing we have to do is we have to look back so that we can leap forward. Hence, that is the enforcement for the past, related to things for the past. And I think the current government has already done a very strong message of enforcement related to illegal activities. And not only on mining, but also related to illegal forestry activities. And that is meaning looking at the past. So what is now, what we're doing now? So we have to create a clear regulatory foundation system so that people can move forward. What is that? That is the introduction of the new regulation. The new presidential regulation is just a start. That one that was announced, signed by the president a few weeks ago, that's just a start, creating the foundation for all the openings of the potential climate financing. So what's next after this? So number one, for example, we have to make sure that we meet the standards. That's why we have to make sure that we meet the standards, the international acceptance. 30 years is good. I know FERA requires 40 years. So we have to look into that. And we have to make sure that, once we meet the standards open so that we know that this can be financed, right? The regulation provide the credibility, the clarity, and the accountability. The standards will provide the acceptability of the market. So the market can work because the government cannot do it by ourselves. Now, going forward, to make sure permanence, to make sure durability, what to do? We have to make sure that we should connect the non-environment aspect into this replantation ARR activities. How to do it? We have to make sure that we we build, we construct the social aspects surrounding that area. Hence comes the social forestry into the equation. Look, people do illegal activities sometimes out of necessity. So the government, everyone, all stakeholders, including private sector, have to find a way to make sure that these people can have their livelihoods improved and also potential so that they can get upward social mobility. So we cannot just do the ARR activities in vacuum. We have to look how to make sure that we can improve the socio-economic aspects within the buffer zone and around that area. so that even after the crediting period finishes, the people don't have, to do illegal activities again, so that they are not forced to do it because they have the livelihoods. If we combine the social forestry replantation, we can improve the agroforestry. We work the private sector to make sure that there are off-takers. Otherwise, with just production, but there is no off-take. People will go into default, right? So we have to make sure that this is also incorporated into that. And what's next? That we have to combine. Carbon credit is not the answer. We need blended financing as well. Blended financing so that this can finance the agroforestry part of that. So we have the carbon credit. We have the services. That's the carbon credit, right? We have the goods and services. The goods are the agroforestry. We can make them together so that we can make sure that the permanence, the durability comes not only because of the regulation, not only because of the standards, but also comes from the real aspiration from the people, because they have now freedom. They are capable to choose, and they have a stream of revenues, right? Freedom to choose legal activities that will give formal income, stable revenue stream that is coming not only from carbon, but also from the new sources of economic activities for them. And this is what we mean by also high quality of growth, new sources of growth that can support our 8% target coming from the president.
Yeah, that's super, Pak. I think, it is really interesting. I like this phrase, look back to leap forward, because that's clearly, there's been a lot of lessons learned over the years in Indonesia on the forest management and what's worked really well and where some lessons can be learned from. I also think the way you've been thinking about that from the new regulatory framework, so it's consistent with the standards, and therefore it's geared up to feed right into the market. And obviously that's going to be important for this to really take off. So thanks very much for that. Ibu Jasmine, so back with the thinking of APP on these issues, how does a practitioner like APP coordinate with governments, with NGOs, and with local communities to align some of the ambitions from your plans and the national goals with targets that you want to achieve or international targets under the government's NDCs?
Thank you. Yeah, for us, the coordination and collaboration is the heart of the Regenesis. So we are ensuring that we are aligned, like what Bu Laksmi mentioned before regarding the Indonesian Biodiversity Action Plan. We are ensuring that our Regenesis is aligned and follows that, and also to follow with the forestry and other land use, follow Net-Sing 2030. It is for the national level, but for the international level, we are ensuring that our program is follow the Society for Ecological Restoration. It is for the restoration, and also aligns with the Article 6 for cooperation mechanism under the Paris Agreement. Our aim is, of course, when you say it is not just about the carbon credit, yes, but when we talk about the benefit sharing for the community, one of the possible things is the carbon credit and the biodiversity credit when it is ready. That's why we aim to produce the high quality integrity for the carbon credit and also the biodiversity credit. So we work. Of course, what we are doing is to support the government of Indonesia. We work closely with the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Forestry, and coordinating Ministry of Food Affairs. We would like that this, through this collaboration, the national policy and also to community action, the Regenesis can help to translate the Indonesian climate ambition. That's from me.
I was just noticing that you've mentioned 3 important ministries there. So when you're designing things, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Forestry, Ministry of Coordinating Food Affairs, like this is an important set of constituencies you have. Please.
That's the from the national. From the the national, but also we also collaborate with the local
Yeah, yeah,
government.
of course.
That's the most important things when we are doing our project or program. We also collaborate with the local government. But it is not just those three ministry. Actually, when we have a program that is related to the marine, we also working closely with them.
Yeah, of course, of course. It's just it demonstrates the complexity of the job that you have at hand, given the scale of the ambition with APP and just the complexity of linking to local government, linking to national government, linking to the international bodies and standards that you've mentioned as well.
Yeah, because when we want to implement the regenesis to achieve the 1 million hectare restoration or conservation, we cannot do it alone. We have to do it together. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, Emily, I'm going to go back to you. So, with GNC, you supported the implementation of conservation and restoration projects in more than 15 countries, probably more than 15 countries. Can you, and you said a little bit about this at Papua New Guinea and the United States earlier, but can you share some of the key learnings that you've had from these projects and some of the enabling factors that you think have been necessary in driving effective partnerships? And I know you have 70 years of experience to draw on, so maybe you could just draw on a few of those years. Thanks.
Yeah, I can. I look good for 70. So one of the things that I lead is I'm on the steering committee of the Global Mangrove Alliance, which is actually part of the MAC, which was referenced here, the Mangrove Alliance for Climate. We're the implementing arm of the MAC and also the Mangrove Breakthrough at large. And one of the things that I learned, and we've been leading this now for 8 years, and we now have 200 NGOs that are part of the Global Mangrove Alliance. We have 14 country chapters that are implementing mangrove restoration and conservation at scale. We've also realized very early on as we started to build out these programs and work with these country chapters that local stakeholder engagement is the first thing you have to do. And you have to work with the communities. You have to understand exactly what their issue is and their problems that they're solving for, because local ecological knowledge surpasses anything that you can get in an ivory tower. And so really understanding what are the dynamics on the ground is going to lead to the best conservation outcomes. And so that's the number one thing we learned, and very quickly we pivoted to local ecological knowledge publications, making sure that the community members got first right in publications, recognizing country sovereign knowledge, and so not allowing that to be outsourced to other universities. And so that, I think, was our first thing, is really bringing it to the community level. The second was making sure that governments are on board. Governments, if they're not on board with these projects, it's really difficult to get them to move forward. So what we tend to do, though, is if you have the local community bought in, it is far easier to advocate at the national, subnational level. And then that helps you then advocate at the international level, which then leads to stronger nationally determined contributions. It clarifies Article 6. It can help with a lot of streamlining down the road. So I'd say policy is the number two that we've really had to work on. And then number three is a weird one, but it's humility. As an NGO, especially as a big NGO coming into this space, you have to come in, again, like that local ecological knowledge, but with the humility of you do not know everything. And so when you form these big partnerships, it's really important to build upon each other's strengths and know when to stand back and not take center stage. And I would say that that has made the Mangrove Alliance so successful and durable, is because we all showed humility. And when we come to the room, we don't say, I'm the Nature Conservancy. We say, I'm the Global Mangrove Alliance. And that makes a big difference when you're in a room and in a space and how you talk about your work. So those would be three.
Yeah, those are super lessons, especially coming from the perspective of a big NGO. Yeah, exactly. Okay, Ria, we're going to finish up this round with you. So we've talked a little bit to date about, one of the big debates in the voluntary carbon markets in recent years is this issue of integrity, of quality, and your term durability, right? So, what are the practical realities of balancing the importance of those with the urgency to get projects moving when there's such a demand and such just a general sense of urgency in this market, in this issue? How do you think about those things, maintaining credibility and real world benefits over decades with the need to get things going?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jack. I think it's a very timely question. To just give you a context before I answer how to balance, right? I think, voluntary carbon market at its peak around 2021 was a 1.5 billion US dollar market, right? And where it was, yes, last year, it is a 500 million market, right? As you can see, the only thing that's left, why even there's still that $500 million market of voluntary carbon market, is the market for integrity projects only. So when you're asking how do we balance, no, we don't balance. We just have to make a quality and high integrity project because there's no market otherwise, right? So do you really want to do this or not? So I think relating to the experience that Emily had, when a project does not meet our own standards of additionality, baseline, co-benefits, we choose not to proceed. Yes, there's a lot of question about a business model viability for carbon project developer. Yes, that's true. But then when you're talking about how we want to shape the market, voluntary market, that we do think still play a role in providing this alternative finance to conservation, right? That is the way to go. So I think the point about balancing, it comes through time, right? When we have the right level of demand that portrays and give conviction to asset owners and project developers that there are supply over there, that we're working towards applying all of this diligence to silver lining at the end of the tunnel, that the demand is coming. I think that would really help. So then more projects are being validated and developed, right? But I guess I want to share you one challenge as a project developer in this, coming towards a high integrity market, right? It feels sometimes like the goalposts always change. It's as if when, post 2022, right? With all the criticism, and I think the market does a lot of work to really regain and really upgrade the methodology and the approaches. Every time there is a new standards, for example, the CCP, then we just had a project where, okay, apparently meeting a CCP standard or like a Vera methodology standard is not enough. You have to apply the IFC sustainability framework standards. It's like another layer. And it's another standard that apparently like even the more mature institutions such as financial institutions cannot meet yet, right? So I guess there's this constant challenge of like talking about integrity and pushing upwards, which we all need to really put ourselves to that pedestal, right? But then the question is, how can we also approach the idea of constructivism, right? Like when we are already meeting the CCP checklist, for instance, that there are, consensus among investors, buyers, developers, asset owners, and policymakers as well, that how do we always constantly improve, right? And not saying that, okay, when you haven't met this, ultimately very, very high standard of like, say, IFC, then the project cannot go through, right? So I guess the always constant discussion about what's practical, what is bare minimum at this level of market integrity, and what's ideal, right? I think that's like a common discourse that needs to be talked more often, because otherwise this $500 million market could be zero, right? Because it doesn't happen anymore. So I guess that kind of challenge, I feel like Indonesia being the country that has a lot of supply, like even up the one regulation of number 110 has just been published. There are more than 400 concessions right now wanting to apply for that permits, right? Because the enthusiasm is there. Sometimes they're taken back because, where is the market? Where's the demand? They want to go there, but why the challenges are so high? Sometimes they think, Ria, maybe I'll just convert my land towards palm oil and make 30% IRR every year, right? Like that's done deal. So I guess a lot of the challenge, not only to think about integrity, but how to make sure it's practical, effective, and always, having the spirit of constructivism to always get there towards the ideal without halting any progress.
Okay, great. So I mean, it is really interesting. So the market is now a third of the size that it once was, but you could also say that the quality has improved, right? So there is, going forward, there isn't going to be just higher integrity and low integrity markets. There's going to be the carbon market, and the carbon market's going to have a floor that is, and everything above that is high integrity, or there's no market for those credits. So this is it's an evolution, and I think you see these sorts of evolutions in many commodities. I don't want to take tropical forest or a mangrove and reduce it to just a commodity, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're going to move to the third topic for our panelists. This is really about mobilizing finance in practice. So it's sort of a nice segue from the fact that we know we need to scale up the finance going into this space. So, Ado, we're going to start with you. So you've obviously just released a really big piece of legislation, a really new policy framework that's going to attract in resources. Can you give us a sneak preview or a hint? Do you expect more incentives or fiscal reforms from the government of Indonesia designed to attract more private sector investment? And I know we're not operating in Chatham House rules here, so you could tell us whatever you have on your mind that you think you might be able to share at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. I'm known to say whatever I have that I have on my mind, so no worries about that. Your question reminds me my old college time when I was still young and thin. So I learned in my college time about incentives. One of the principles of economics in my Econ 101 says that people are moved by incentives. Unfortunately, come 20, 25 years later, people always relate incentives with fiscal incentives. I don't think that's quite right. That's not wrong. But it's not the whole universe. Incentives could be fiscal, could be non-fiscal. Now, how to make the business moves? In my view, without introducing any fiscal incentives, the business can still move around, can still, can still make the engines and the likes. Why? Even without clear natural resources endowment, people can still do it. In my view, even with fiscal incentives, that's good, but it's neither necessary nor sufficient. My personal view, I could be very wrong. The presence of clear, reliable environment, hence the regulatory environment, and institutions, quality institutions, those two are sufficient to make businesses come. The reason is simple. If people get clarity, certainty, accountability, and stability, they can compute. I think businesses, correct me if I'm wrong, Marisa, they don't hate risk. They like risk, so long as it can be calculated risk. Right? That's why we have risk-adjusted returns, right? And I know for the investors, they're just going to make sure that the returns will be above their hurdle rate. I don't know what their hurdle rate is, but I know you're going to invest anyway. If they see that, okay, this is good business, I know there is clear regulation, there is clear regulatory framework there, it's clear institutional, the institutions can deliver, people will invest. I'm going to get healthy margins, good IRR, positive NPV, people will invest. Now, so what to do for carbon? In my view, we're still at the very nascent state. So we have to make sure our foundation is right? So hence, the government needs to introduce regulations to build our regulatory framework that are not, I would say, detrimental towards all these businesses to work. So my advice will always be keep it simple. Keep it simple but enforceable. Why? If we make it very difficult for people to start, then it will create many loopholes. Many loopholes will create uncertainty, unclear things. People will not come. It doesn't matter how many fiscal incentives coming from the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance can produce tens of fiscal incentives. It might not work, right? So that's why the most important. So I think Indonesian government now, which I'm also part of, already had a good start. That is the regulation. Now, the next challenge is what are the other implementing regulations? So if all of these are clear, and then we can build also robust institutions around it, we don't need fiscal incentives. Because all the private investors can calculate the risk, they can project their margins, and then if it's healthy, they can come. Now, should we introduce fiscal incentives or other types of fiscal incentives? Yeah, why not? But when should we do it? Maybe if it's not good enough. If there is a presence of market failure, then the government has to act and provide fiscal incentives. But my view is always like fiscal incentives, in this case, yeah, if it's fiscal incentives, is neither necessary nor sufficient to make sure that the market works. Now, going forward to your statement, I hope going forward about dual market, I hope that will not be the case. I hope it will only be one market, and that market is for high integrity, high quality carbon credit, and Indonesia will be the #1 supplier to supply these global power goods for the world. Thank you.
Okay, so we've heard it right here. Indonesia will be the #1 supplier of high quality, high integrity credits for the world. That's excellent. No, I think it's a good distinction, right? We do have people talk often about fiscal incentives, but policy incentives are even more powerful in creating those notions of stability, certainty, and drawing down or allowing companies to actually price the risk, because ultimately that's what companies will do. Okay, Ibu Jasmine, APP has been in the process of implementing restoration projects across an array of a whole bunch of different jurisdictions. Can you tell us about how you adapt and adopt different bits of practice to that are, to deal with unique conditions that exist? Because obviously you're operating in a number of different areas, complex operating environment, and frankly, different sorts of local government as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Yes, every landscape, every project area have their own challenge and their own strength. So we look at the challenge and also the strength, how we can maximize the strength so become a benefit for the project itself. I would like to tell the story about our project with Waiken or TNC in South Sumatra. It is the coastal area project where the coastal is now degraded because of the activity of illegal fishing. There's a lot of illegal pond that has been developed there. Therefore, those area degraded. And then together with Waiken and several partners, we collaborate and working together there. We first, yes, community is the first thing that we need to see, because if the livelihood is not increased, they will not change their mindset. So the first thing we do is we do the mapping, the community mapping, and then after that we collaborate with the local government, the governor of South Sumatra, and then the governor of South Sumatra launched a decree that those area is protected for mangrove. Then after that, we try to discuss with the community why they should do illegal fishing or develop a ponds there. And then after that, after the discussion, then they also realized that after several cycles, the result of the fishery is not as good as the first time. Meaning illegal fishery is not the solution for their income. So together with Waikan, we try to develop how we can restore the mangrove area, but also the pond still can be there through the aquaculture and also the water management on that area. Then the community also realized that if the mangrove is not protected or is not planted back, it will damaging further for them. So right now we are on the second stages, and we are also maybe this project will be scale up into the public-private community partnership, what Bu Nani has mentioned before. So yeah, every project, every area is very different. Then sometimes we become a co-manager that facilitate the area and the project. Sometimes we become like for the blended finance to connect from the small enterprise to the market.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating, just that last point that you've made. Sometimes you're the technical assistance provider, sometimes you're providing the blended finance. It's like the entity that's closest to the action is going to play the most deliberate role in engaging with those communities. So Okay, we're going to stay because you mentioned TNC. We're going to stay with the Nature Conservancy here, or YCAN. Sorry. So Emily, what role can organizations like TNC, which has a very large footprint around the world, play to help ensure accountability and reporting in restoration initiatives, funded with blended finance or other forms of finance?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to say something controversial first.
Love it. Go for it.
Let's go for it. You cannot sell a carbon credit that's blue carbon for less than $100 a ton. It's not going to work at anything below $100 a ton. Because when you think about all of the costs that come along with OPEX and then getting to CAPEX, it's just not possible. Because if we want to have 60% benefit sharing, which is what we know we need for these communities to be bought into the projects, that's expensive. If we want to do restoration of coastal systems is very, very expensive. It is not cheap to do. You cannot just plant a mangrove. It is not possible. Most of the time you have to do hydrological interventions, which are very expensive. And then you're also getting to just little things like building materials, co-benefits for the local communities of other types of businesses that they can invest in where they still have the money they need to survive. And so I think that the price needs to be right. And if it's not right, as you said, it needs to be blended finance. And so the Nature Conservancy, we've done a lot on blended finance, especially in the carbon market space, because we aren't seeing buyers at $100 a ton. So that means we have to bring in philanthropy to cover the upfront costs of setting up these projects. So they're the ones doing the pre-feasibility, the feasibility, the community outreach. Once we then see the project is viable, we then often go to the government and ask for some support, especially for restoration, because restoration costs are so high that philanthropic funding can't even cover it. So it's usually government or multilateral, bilateral funding to then go into the restoration of these projects. And then when it comes to that more long-term sustainability and modeling, that is where it's exciting, where that's where the carbon financing actually finally comes into play. And so that's where that durability and that permanence comes in, is that carbon financing, is that final little circle, which is the one that's doing the monitoring. It's using geospatial data to see, is this actually working? And I would say that third bit, though, is what's really important about that bit is that it's scientifically based. And so the Nature Conservancy has done a lot working with communities and then also globally explaining what does that look like, what is good. So for mangroves, we have the mangrove restoration tool, which actually showcases exactly what you have to do to monitor your mangrove systems. We also have a geospatial tool called Global Mangrove Watch, which is freely available that people can use, that also helps inform your carbon market projects. And this is also really important because it's free of charge, so these local communities can do it, because those costs are quite high to do monitoring. And so then that allows that carbon finance to keep going and then help that sustainability. So I would say that's kind of our big way of coming at this.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because I think in a lot of these issues, there's different forms of money that need to come in at different forms of different times, right? So as you stated, you've got philanthropy up front that can help build social capital and try to figure out what's actually going on. There's clearly a role for government public expenditure in this space, either direct government expenditure or through multilateral development banks or ODA or whatever the case may be. And then and only then can the carbon financing really take hold. And I think, you know, you see this in many commodities, right? You're doing market discovery, market building, and eventually the supply and demand is going to figure out. This just has a floor that's high compared to where the demand is in its own mind. It's not high for the cost. That cost is a reality. So it's great that, I mean, this is going to take a little bit of time to sort out if our future market on carbon credits is only high quality, high integrity. Yeah, we're going to go to you now, and then we're going to end up with Marissa. So how do you measure and communicate the value created from restoration activities to financial partners? And maybe you could just say something about that price differential issue that Emily has just raised as well.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I couldn't agree more. I think there are a lot of buyers at the moment who are still thinking, you know, how can I still purchase at less? But I guess that's where, you know, more creativity in the financing, and I hope to hear from you as well, Marissa, where it comes in as well. But I guess on the question about communicating this, right? I guess there's three layers of how we really try to communicate well. Number one is the availability of data. So all of the information about, where it was before, which is the baseline, and where it is today. Thankfully, we're already in this, age of technology where all of those information that is satellite based could be accessible by everyone, right? And it can really show you, the difference between before and after. The second layer for communication is transparency. The data could be there, but could people really access it? Is it really transparent enough for people to see that the data is accurate? And this level of transparency sometimes needs a little bit of work because the ability to digest and to access this information is different for everyone. At Atmos, we try to develop our own dashboard to communicate this, the accessibility between before and after, and how the different tonnage of carbon credits that has been absorbed prior. It is a lot of work, but it does seem that we need to also communicate it in the language of the user, which is the last part of communication, which is the storytelling, right? So when we're trying to communicate our impact to financial investors as well as to buyer, it's different if we are going to communicate the impact to the community as well as the asset owners, right? Who really think about, Ria, when is this $100 coming in every ton, right? And not just like planting every year, every day. So we need to really tailor what is important to each stakeholder. For example, for investors, not only that it does absorb, that it does give you also the returns, but also does it meet the standards that these investors have, right? But particularly for communities, sometimes technology is also not always the case, right? It's not as simple as providing a dashboard, but it's all about being there and showcasing that what you planted over the past 5 years, which you have already nurtured and monitored and really maintained every year, can really give you the benefits of opening new schools, opening scholarship programs for your kids, right? So these type of communication really needs to happen in person. So it really depends on which stakeholders, and as we already agreed that this is a very complex and multi-stakeholders, a big part of we do as project owners, project developers, is to constantly communicate. And also just to touch on the last point was just about progress, right? It may not happen today, but how do you always communicate that we are progressing and trying to achieve this impact? Especially if you're talking about, let's talk about these aquaculture fish ponds farmers, right? That actually live day by day selling the shrimps out of their unsustainable aquaculture to the market, and now you tell them to stop, plant, and then hopes one day someone will give you the money, right? So I guess this type of communication really giving the conviction that the financial income as well as the climate impact is going to come. It is a very sometimes thankless job, but I guess with the right market to appreciate such effort, it should happen.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, right? We're talking about a commodity here, essentially a carbon credit. And at the same time, storytelling is so instrumental in the sale of that carbon credit or the investment in the restoration. And maybe at some point in the future, that's not going to be as important. It's going to be more of a fungible idea, but this is where we are right now. Okay, so in this round, the last question goes to you, Marissa. And we're sort of getting close on our time. So what we're going to do here, by the way, is I've got one more question from Marissa. I've totally mismanaged the time, so we're unfortunately not going to have audience questions, but I am going to give all the panelists one final minute to say something. Before we get there, Marissa, one last question for you. How do you address the concerns from your position around permanence, additionality, leakage for restoration finance in emerging economies like Indonesia? And frankly, not even emerging economies, that's just where your business is, I know.
Well, I think we've touched on so much of it already today in the sense that investors will have confidence if they do believe that the credit that they're buying won't disappear tomorrow, right? What they're investing in is a nature solution that is, by definition, needs to perform over a very long period of time. But exactly to Emily's point, this is why you have the difference between a $100 market and a $2 market. The $2 market isn't taking this into consideration, and that doesn't do anybody a service. So in a funny way, this is going to sound odd, but I'm not bothered by the fact that we went from a multi-billion-dollar market to a $500 million market, because I think what that's done is we have weeded out and beginning to weed out those that fundamentally aren't performing the way they should. So I think that's step one, is allow that to happen. And by the way, I've been in the capital markets for almost 40 years. And what I can tell you is every time you build a new asset class, and let's call this an asset class, round one is not where you end up. You're learning as you go. And I think we're also very hard on ourselves. And sometimes the media isn't helpful either, because they're looking for that sensational negative story. And of course, there were some bad actors in our carbon markets, but most people who went into this went in very, very much with the mind that we're trying to build a market that is going to serve. And we learn as we go. And who knew what the right price was as we were getting into these very complex restoration activities and so on. So I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace to allow ourselves to learn, call out when it's not working, get the right price for the right activity, and then be very, very firm in our conviction that $100 is the right price for an ocean restoration project. But maybe there's some other type of project which is less complex that can have a different price. So now we're starting to categorize, not though saying high and low. It is the right price for the right type of outcome. And then that lets different participants participate in things that are right for them. So I think that's one. Two is, I really love, Paquito, your comment about these restoration projects. The more you can create multiple revenue streams, that is our definition, I think, over long term of permanence, or whatever words we want to use, because longevity is going to be created by creating a sustainable business model that can withstand, and markets will fluctuate, mind you, and allow some buffer cushion and also more multiple revenue streams, and then ultimately the communities benefit, and then they become the advocates. They go to the government and say, I want this in my community. They don't fight it, they say, I want it, and then it makes very much an easier dialogue with the governments who are trying to do the policy making. So hopefully
that's super. I mean, it is interesting that you're trying to build a new asset class, and there will be a lot of washout in the bottom in the first couple of years or the first number of years. And then I think that other thing that you've mentioned, where, whether we're looking for high quality, high integrity credits, the floor price in a terrestrial forest system may be different from the floor price in a mangrove system.
And different from an engineered carbon capture and storage credit, or we were just on a panel with a coal decommissioning credit.
Absolutely.
They're very, very different. By the way, can I just make one hopeful comment?
Yes, I'm going to give you your last comment, and you can go first.
Okay, last topic.
This is your last comment. Let me just
last
frame
comment,
this.
I'll make it super fast.
Let me just frame it. The last comment that everybody gets to make is, this is early in the COP process. What is the message you want to be able to deliver to the people here in this room and everybody who's not in this room about this topic? So think about that. So you get you're up first. You get to think about it on the fly.
Okay. Well, I wanted to leave you with a hopeful message, which is the one. If I were to ask next time we do the panel, one person that should be in the room are the big tech providers that are taking the data and helping us use AI to interpret this better. Jack, you and I were at that lunch. And I have to say that a lot of the tech firms are looking at the power of their ability to interpret and communicate data to give us confidence. They want to give us a public good. So exactly to your point, make it available to communities to use, to communicate with those of us who want to measure it. And I think that is a wonderful gift to all of these markets, because it's also going to make even the conservation NGOs, much faster, and it'll make the investors much faster. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. So the message I want to communicate is, we're all working toward a common goal, and the collective power of everything that we bring to the table really will knock each one of these complexities down. And then when it all comes together, and it will, because it's born out of necessity, there aren't other options in many cases, then we're going to have this wonderful liquid functioning markets. You won't have funny price differentials. We can trade them. If you want to know the price of your credit, I can deliver that to you fast. And you can have your projects be funded fast, and then we start to get to speed and scale.
Okay, super. Ria, 30 seconds. Last thing you want to communicate, and I do mean 30 seconds.
All right, okay. We need more buyers that are paying the right price. I can close on that, but just to tell you know, we are working with 400 concession owners that every day ask, Ria, should I plant palm oil or should I make carbon credits? So we're dealing with these existencies issues. So just make sure we can get more demands at the right price.
Okay, so we need demand to pull those credits through the system. Emily, what about you? What do we need?
So I think the word that they're using at this COP is partnership. I think that's the official word. So I would say partnership, and it's partnership at all levels. Exactly. We need to partner with the buyers and take them on a journey of how much it should really cost. And I'll give a shout out to Salesforce. They've been amazing in the blue carbon space, coming on a journey with us. So there are investors out there who are ready to take that journey. Then we need to partner with NGOs. We need to partner with the scientists. We need to partner with AI. We need to partner with the local communities. And so taking that idea of partnership, I think, is really critical because it's the only way.
Super. Ibu Jasmine, what about you? What do we need?
Okay, almost all is already mentioned by Ria, Marisa, and yeah. Okay, so I just want to say that through the SRV 2030 and also Regenesis 2050, APP sees the restoration is an investment for our shared future. Together, we can restore the balance and build a brighter tomorrow for our generations to come. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much. Okay, so we started with the government. We're going to end in the government as we should.
Yeah.
So,
I knew you
what do we
intentionally
need?
put me last.
What do we need?
Yeah, and now it's end, and it's difficult for me. Okay, two things. Number one, carbon financing is not everything. It's not the silver bullet, but it is instrumental and critical. Number two, what we need to build is trust. So that is what is missing. The market fails not because of lack of supply, lack of demand. No, lack of trust. Where do we build the trust? The supply, the demand, and everything in between.
Okay, so super. So we've got data firms involved. We've got a demand signal we need. We've got partnerships. We need collaboration for the shared future, and we need trust. So I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank the government of Indonesia for the pavilion. I'd like to thank all of you.